Hello nerds, welcome back to my channel and to a little bit of a new setup today. I brought this TV in here to show you a PowerPoint that I made, and apologies, I cannot get rid of this banner, I don't know how. Sometimes I am technologically challenged. Today we are going to be doing a deep dive into the Greek and Roman mythology found within the Hunger Games series. I really wanted to include a lot of pictures for this to help build context. But I edit on iMovie, it's free. However, when I try to do too much, it likes to crash and be really slow, and it's quite frustrating. So I did a little bit of research, and I found a video by, I think the creator is Your Boy Needs a Hobby. I will put a screenshot of the video so you can go watch it. I was like, wow, yeah, PowerPoints are a thing. Let me make one.
Hello, Editing Emma here. I didn't realize until after I finished filming everything that it is very hard to see my PowerPoint slides because there's a glare. Some of the pictures are really small, and I also couldn't seem to help standing in front of the TV. My solution was to create a Patreon where I have uploaded the slides so that you can see them better if that's what you would like to do. I do have it set to a 7-day free trial if you don't or can't pay for the membership, which totally understandable. Just don't forget to cancel the membership afterwards. If you do, however, choose to pay for it, first of all, very much appreciated. Second of all, I have decided that I would actually like to use this Patreon to give you guys bonus content. So I would upload things like some of my research notes, some of my book annotations, other PowerPoint slides if I choose to do that for future videos, and also project updates on things that I am working on. And if enough people sign up, I would start including extra bonus content like blooper reels or whatever else you guys might be interested in watching. So anyways, you can find that linked in the description below. Thank you. Let's get back to the video.
These books are not retellings. However, many of the characters are inspired by mythological figures and their stories, as well as historical figures and their stories. Today, I'm tackling the mythology of it all. A few years ago, I did a series on TikTok with this, but since the release of Sunrise on the Reaping and some new characters being included in the story, I thought it would be fun to make a super long video where I can just clump it all together for you. You guys already know that I am such a huge nerd for political science. My other passion is mythology. Thank you, Percy Jackson. I know these myths like the back of my hand, and I'm so excited to talk about them today, especially in the context of the Hunger Games. Hello, I think it's so cool that mythology inspired this world. And so yes, I know that this is super niche, but I hope you guys enjoy watching this as much as I have enjoyed making it. I do need to give a trigger warning before you watch this video. Far too many stories in Greek and Roman mythology are stories of rape, assault, and violence. I'm not going to be going into very specific details. Mostly I will just be saying X character was assaulted, or I will be speculating whether or not a union between two characters was consensual. However, at the very end of this video in the section on Titus, I am going to be giving small details. So if you think that that will trigger you, please feel free to skip that. There's zero judgment, and I will never know if you skipped it. I need you to prioritize your mental health because being triggered is quite literally one of the worst feelings ever. You won't be missing much because Titus is such a minor character and is literally mentioned one time within 5 lines of text in the first book. So it's okay, you can skip it if you need to. For some of the characters in this series, the similarities between their mythological counterparts end with their names. So for example, we have Alpheus, a male tribute from District 2 who is named after the river god Alpheus, a river that is located in southern Greece. Alpheus is only named once in Sunrise on the Reaping, and Haymitch never interacts with him, and so that's all we get. And then we also have Venus from the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, who is the little girl that talks with Lucy Gray through the bars of the zoo. Venus is the Roman goddess of love, and that is it for the connection because we don't know anything about this little girl. There are plenty of characters though who share both the name and the character arc, meaning the Hunger Games character and their mythological counterpart have very similar literary lives. But before I get into that, let's start with the myth that inspired the basic plot of these books. Theseus the Minotaur and the Labyrinth. Cue slide change. I hate this guy. Theseus, I hate you. He really sucks in the myths. I will tell you about that. I am of the perhaps unpopular opinion that he was a serial killer because on his journey from Troyes to Athens, he murdered people instead of killing monsters. He is just a little piece of... Insert your swear word of choice here. He also once kidnapped a child and then planned to hold her hostage until she was of marriageable age, which in the ancient world is still when women are children. He also once dumped a girl by stranding her on an island. Yeah. So the fact that Katniss, my beloved, is inspired by this little piece of shit hurts my heart, but I am going to put my burning hatred aside to explain to you the connections in this myth. So, very quick summary. Aegeus is the king of Athens, who is the father to Theseus, the prince of Athens, and he was partly responsible for the death of the Cretan king's son. The Cretan king is King Minos. In punishment, Minos demanded that Athens send 7 young boys and 7 young girls to Crete every year, or maybe it's every 9 years, or maybe it's every 7 years, to be devoured by the Minotaur, this cute little guy right here. The Minotaur is half man, half bull. Don't ask about the logistics, it's very fucked up. And he was the monstrous prisoner that was held inside the labyrinth, which was built by Daedalus. Famous inventor, trapped inside the labyrinth with his son Icarus. He is a prisoner, and he tried to escape with his son by strapping man-made wings made out of bird feathers to their backs and then jumping out of a window. But Icarus, high on his own freedom, flew too close to the water and then too close to the sun, and the wax got wet and then melted, and he plummeted to his death. Back in Athens, Aegeus is reunited with Theseus. Like I said, he went from Troezen, where he was born, to Athens, reunited with his father, and there he learns about King Minos' punishment, and he decides that he is going to volunteer as tribute to be one of the 7 Athenian boys who will be sacrificed to the Minotaur. Upon his arrival in Crete, he falls in love with King Minos' daughter, Ariadne. This is the girl that he later strands on an island, and then he also marries her sister after that. She helps Theseus by giving him a magical ball of yarn that will help him navigate the labyrinth, and then giving him a sword to slay the Minotaur. Theseus is successful, he slays the Minotaur, he flees Crete, and he takes Ariadne and her sister Phaedra with him. He also takes the other Athenian youths. He didn't forget about them. I guess that's one good thing that he did. Upon his return to Athens, Theseus forgets to change the color of his sails from black to white. The black was supposed to signify that he was dead to his father. The white would signify that he still lived. So his father sees the black sail, is devastated by his death, and then proceeds to fling himself off of a cliff into the Aegean Sea, which, fun fact, is why it's called the Aegean, because Aegean. So how does this connect to the Hunger Games? Katniss is Theseus. They both volunteer and are responsible for ending a violent punishment against people who had no responsibility in the reason why this punishment was created in the first place. Peeta is Ariadne, helping Katniss as much as he can in surviving the arena. It is a common interpretation that Theseus faked his love for Ariadne and manipulated her into helping him, which is kind of what Katniss did to Peeta. She faked her love for him so that they could both survive. However, I agree with what Katniss did. I don't agree with what Theseus did. He should have just taken her with him instead of leaving her on Naxos. It's unforgivable, I'm sorry. The ball of yarn and the sword are kind of like the berries and the force field, which are both used against the capital in the games. Snow is obviously King Minos, the tyrannical ruler who will do anything to get and keep what they want. Labyrinth is the arenas, but because labyrinths can also symbolize navigating through life and solving puzzles, it can also represent how the characters have to navigate the war and the revolution. In Mockingjay, Squad 451 navigates the capital's pods. They never know exactly where they are or when they are going to go off. And Katniss struggles to navigate her role as the Mockingjay. The tributes in the games are the Minotaur. The Minotaur is held in the labyrinth as a prisoner. He did not choose to be there. He was forced to kill people. The districts did not choose to send their children to the Hunger Games, and yet there they were, being forced to kill other children. Like the Minotaur, the tributes are unwillingly turned into something violent. Would the Minotaur have been a gentle creature if Minos hadn't trained him to be a monster? Icarus represents the death of youth and innocence. Like Icarus, Prim and Rue and so many of the other children died far too soon, especially Prim, who likely felt as though she gained a little bit of freedom upon arriving in District 13 because she was able to do some medical practice and become a doctor. But Coin used that against Katniss and killed Prim. Casca Highbottom is Daedalus. They are both responsible for creating a weapon that was used to kill children. Daedalus built the labyrinth, and Highbottom came up with the concept for the Hunger Games, Romulus. Both of them are credited with creating a machine of violence, but neither of them agree with what this machine is actually used for. And finally, Aegeus is Miss Everdeen. Astrid Everdeen thought that Katniss had been killed when she was shot in District 2, and then again when they were in the capital taking refuge in a building that the Peacekeepers bombed. Fortunately, she had no cliff to fling herself off of, but in a way, the intense grief that she experiences is kind of like a metaphorical death. She is still alive, but she is not living. Now we can actually get into the individual characters, and I'm just going to go alphabetically to keep this organized. So first, we're going to look at Apollo and Diana ring. The two siblings are named after the Roman gods Apollo and Diana, who were also twins in the mythology. You might know Diana better by her Greek equivalent, which is Artemis. Apollo has the same name in both mythologies. Apollo was the god of prophecy, music, archery, healing, plague. He was also a protector of young boys and cattle, and was also sometimes equated with Helios, the Titan god of the sun, meaning that he was responsible for driving the chariot that carried the sun across the sky. He was often depicted in artwork as a youth. Diana, or Artemis, was quite similar. She was the goddess of hunting, wildlife, childbirth, and the protection of young women. Like her brother, she could also be the harbinger of disease, and also drove a chariot, and although she is later associated with the moon, her chariot did not drive the moon across the sky. Apollo and Diana Ring both mentored a tribute from District 6 in the 10th Hunger Games. Apollo mentored the boy and Diana the girl, very fitting considering their godly counterparts were protectors of youths. Before the games began, there is a scene in the Capitol Zoo where the District 6 tributes start to dance, and then Apollo and Diana clap along to it and encourage the audience to do the same, and it creates a very festive environment. And I feel like this works really well with Apollo being the god of music. The twins and their tributes were killed in the arena bombing, so just like how their godly counterparts are depicted as youths in artwork, Apollo and Diana Ring would forever be remembered young. Moving on, we have Miss Arachne Crane, and she is named after the mortal woman who was transformed into the very first spider. Arachne Crane was the mentor for the District 10 girl in the 10th Hunger Games. Her family gained extreme wealth after building luxury hotels across Panem, and she died by having her throat slit by the tribute she was mentoring after taunting her with some food between the bars. She was spoken of very highly at her funeral, which Corio did not agree with because he thought she was a boisterous bully and didn't think that she deserved such praise. In his opinion, she didn't die a heroic death the way that the Ring twins did. Like I said, she was a bully, and she would not have acted that way towards her tribute if she did not think herself superior to district people. Mythological Arachne challenged the goddess Athena, the goddess of weaving among other things like war strategy, to a contest to see who would be the better weaver. And she believed her skills to be much better than the goddess, which they were. Athena's tapestry depicted the gods in all of their glory. Arachne's tapestry depicted the complete opposite. She depicted scenes of how the gods were violent towards mortals, mostly about how male gods often raped women mortals. Arachne won the contest, and this enraged Athena for two reasons. One, because she was jealous of Arachne's talent, and two, because she basically just dogged on all the gods. I mean, rightfully so, but Athena did not like that. Athena then verbally and physically abuses Arachne, who ends up taking her own life because of this, and then Athena, either out of pity or to continue the punishment, turns her into the first spider. Both Arachnes are prideful and arrogant, but I have so much sympathy for this one and none for her. The mythological Arachne had every reason to despise the violence of the gods, and Athena only proved her point that the gods were violent by transforming her into a spider. Arachne Crane, on the other hand, her death was the direct result of her own cruelty, if it isn't the consequences of your own actions. Next, we have a new introduction to the series from Sunrise on the Reaping, and that is Camilla, who was one of the female tributes from District 2 in the 50th Hunger Games. And I'm really excited to talk about this because the mythological Camilla is such a badass, and I love her. So Camilla was a part of the career pack, and at some point she ended up breaking away from them with Lupe or Loop from District 1. I'm not sure how you pronounce that name. And they encountered Maisie, who shot and killed Lupe with a poisoned dart. Maisie suspected that she had also shot Camilla, but Camilla likely had an antidote on her and survived from that, and she was later killed by the volcanic eruption. Camilla from the myths is found in books 7 and 11 of Virgil's Aeneid. My favorite epic poem. She was the legendary leader of the Volscian warriors, and she fought against the Trojans in the War of Latium. She steeled for battle and outruns the winds on foot. She'd fly above the topmost tips of uncut stalks and not hurt the tender ears when she did. Or run across the sea, skimming the high swells and not splash her quick feet with the water. I told you she was badass. As soon as she could walk, she wielded weapons and was trained for combat by her father. In the war, she breaks off on her own and defeats many enemies, but she is stalked by a Trojan ally named Ares, who ends up killing her in a moment of distraction. Camilla's patron goddess Diana avenges her by sending an attendant to kill Ares. And the Trojans eventually won this war. Both Camillas were trained from birth to be warriors. District 2 was the weapons manufacturing district. It was the one that supplied the capital with the most peacekeepers. It also trained children for the Hunger Games, so they were raised from birth to be part of this world. Both Camillas broke off from the larger group, both were stalked, and both were killed. Although in the Hunger Games, Maisily didn't kill her, it was the volcano that did. In the Aeneid, Camilla fought on the Latin side. In the Hunger Games, Camilla fought on the career side. Just as the Latins lost the war against the Trojans, so did the career pack against the newcomers. Next up, we have all of our favorite brothers in the Hunger Games, Castor and Pollux, who are named after Castor and Polydeuces from mythology, who are also twin brothers. In the Hunger Games, they had both defected from the capital, gone to District 13, and become cameramen for Squad 451. Pollux was an Avox forced into slavery, who previously worked in the capital's underground utility corridor, which was called the Transfer. I find that very interesting since we were introduced to the idea of transfer in Sunrise on the Reaping. And he worked there for several years until Castor was able to buy his freedom. When the rebels laid siege to the capital, Pollux guided Squad 451 underground, and it was there that Castor was killed by the lizard mutts. Castor and Polydeuces, also known as the Dioscuri or the Gemini, were twin stepbrothers, and I know that might sound like an oxymoron, but let me just explain this weird and wacky story to you. The brothers had the same mother, and her name was Leda, and she was the queen of Sparta. And she did the deed with her husband Tyndareus. Later on, she was raped by Zeus in the form of a swan. Leda became pregnant with 2 sets of twins, or maybe 1 set of quadruplets. Then she laid an egg. Maybe it was 2 eggs. Regardless, inside that egg was 2 children fathered by Tyndareus. Those were Castor and Clytemnestra, and 2 fathered by Zeus, Helen and Polydeuces. As young men, the brothers took part in many adventures. They were part of the Argonauts who voyaged all the way to Colchis and got the Golden Fleece, and they also participated in the Caledonian boar hunt. When their sister Helen was kidnapped by Theseus, at the oldest, she was 9. Fuck you, Theseus. They laid siege to Athens and rescued her. Now, they would have been part of the Trojan War and participated in the rescuing of Helen from Troy, but they died a little bit before that in a battle between 2 brothers, Idas and Lycaeus. The battle began because Castor and Polydeuces stole their cattle and also raped and kidnapped their wives. Polydeuces was deified and turned into a constellation by Zeus, and he asked his father to do the same for Castor. Zeus agreed, but to appease the fates, the twins had to spend alternate days in heaven and the underworld so they could basically never be together again. The mythological twins, shitheads. The Hunger Games twins, I love them. Chef's kiss. Both sets of twins laid siege to a city and both were deified. One set into a constellation and the other set into the memory of Panem because they were part of the Star Squad and helped save the country. 2 major differences here are that Pollux did not die, meanwhile Polydeuces did. And where in the mythology it is Polydeuces who saves Castor, it is actually Castor who saves Pollux in the Hunger Games by freeing him from being an Avox slave. Okay, next up we have Cato, and I'm really excited to talk about him because I have seen nobody make this connection. Cato is not a mythological figure. And you might be like, wait a minute, isn't Cato a Roman senator a real person? And yes, you would be right. However, there is a character in mythology who shares a very, very similar character arc to Cato. And the character in question is Actaeon, who was transformed into a stag by Artemis after she caught him spying on her while she bathed naked. It was completely an accident and he didn't intend to see her, but she really said, fuck you, bibbidi boppity boo. Actaeon was then chased, attacked, and killed by his own hunting dogs. In another version of the myth, he was transformed because he bragged about his skill as a hunter and said that he was better than Artemis. As you'll recall, Cato is the boy from District 2 in the 74th Hunger Games, and he was part of the career pack and was the top contender to win those games. During the games, he makes sport of hunting down the other tributes, and he's eventually killed by the wolf mutts. Both characters died excruciatingly long deaths. Actaeon did not die until Artemis decided that her wrath had been satiated, and Cato was mauled for an entire night by the mutts. And it would have gone on longer, but Katniss decided to show him mercy and shot him with her last arrow. I used Ovid's Metamorphoses to draw these parallels, and in this epic poem there is something called the Catalogue of Dogs. A catalog is essentially a really long list of actors involved within a given myth. I would say that the most famous catalog is the Catalogue of Ships in Homer's Iliad, where all the Greek ships, who's on them and where they're from, are listed. The Catalogue of Dogs in Metamorphoses is a long list of all of Actaeon's hunting dogs, their names, and where they are from. It is darkly humorous, and Ovid really sets the scenes by building up how Actaeon is going to be mauled, and then presenting this catalog of ridiculous and silly names of the hunting dogs. Let me just read a quick section of it to you. The whole pack came rushing at him like a storm. Gazelle and Greedy and Ridge Rover, all Arcadians, with Killdeer and Tornado and Sturdy Hunter, Fearsome Birdie, Gwen gets me every time, and Savage Sylvia, who'd lately been gored by a boar, and Snap, a wolf, her dam, and Faithless Shepherdess. And it continues on. Some of the other names include Fang, Spot, Yipper, Brownie, and Buster. There is also a catalog of sorts in the Hunger Games. It is much shorter, but it is still a list of names and places. When Katniss first gets a good look at the wolf mutts, she notices that they look a little too similar to the tributes who had died. First, she notices Glimmer, and then the various sizes and colors. The small one with the red coat and amber eyes, Foxface. And there, the ashen hair and hazel eyes of the boy from District 9 who died as we struggled for the backpack. And worst of all, the smallest mutt with dark glossy fur, huge brown eyes, and a collar that reads 11 in woven straw, teeth bared in hatred. Rue. Actaeon was killed by his own hunting pack of dogs. Cato was killed by his own career pack of tributes. Next up, we have Io Jasper, and sadly, this is the only picture I could find of her acting in the Hunger Games, and it is very blurry, so instead I used this beautiful photo of the actress alongside it. And she was the mentor for the District 3 boy tribute in the 10th Hunger Games. She was one of the top performing students of the Academy, and her parents were scientists. During the interview process of the games, she tried her best to elevate her tribute's skills and intelligence. Io from Greek mythology was a mortal lover to Zeus. I believe this is supposed to be him here. Unclear if it was consensual on her part, very likely that it wasn't. When Hera visits her husband on suspicion that he'd been cheating on her, he turned Io into a heifer, into a cow, so that his affair would not be discovered. But Hera, she was too smart for that. She requested that the cow be given to her as a gift. Zeus obliged, thinking that he'd gotten away with it, and gave his wife Io. Hera then set her 100-eyed bodyguard Argus to watch Io at all times, and later Io wanders the earth and Hera sets a gadfly after her that bites at her constantly. When she'd wandered all the way to Egypt, Zeus finally relented and transformed her back into the mortal woman that she was. It's kind of difficult to pull out any similarities between these characters, but I do have some speculations. One could argue that if Zeus and Hera in this myth represent the capital, Io Jasper was a victim, same as the mythological Io. None of the Academy students were necessarily willing participants in the games. They were essentially forced to become mentors, and many of them did not want to do that. And perhaps the same way that the gadfly hunted and tormented Io from the mythology, perhaps the death of Io Jasper's tribute haunted her long after the games ended. Next up, we have Iphigenia Moss, who is another character where it's kind of hard to draw parallels beyond her name, but I do have some headcanons. Iphigenia Moss was a capital resident whose father oversaw agriculture, and she was a mentor in the 10th Hunger Games. Because her father controlled the flow of food within Panem, it's very likely that she had good access to this food, but as revenge against her father, she refused to eat. She always looked on the verge of malnutrition. Clemencia is the one who tells Corio that she was doing this as a form of revenge, but we don't know anything beyond that. Iphigenia from mythology was the daughter of the Mycenaean king Agamemnon. Just before the Greeks set sail to Troy for the Trojan War, Agamemnon pissed off Artemis. He either boasted that he was a better hunter than her or killed one of her sacred deer. And as punishment, she requested that he give her a human sacrifice, Iphigenia. And I'm just now realizing how many of these myths involve Artemis, but I feel like it's really fitting because her weapon of choice is the bow and arrow, same as Katniss. Anyways, Agamemnon told Iphigenia that she would wed the famed warrior Achilles, and he put together a fake wedding for her and brought her all the way to the altar, and just as she was realizing that Achilles was nowhere to be found, Agamemnon slit her throat. At the last moment though, Artemis whisked the girl away and replaced her body with that of a stag. So Iphigenia technically lived, but her family believed her dead. And there is a whole revenge story that comes after this killing, and it is the plot for Aeschylus's trilogy of plays called the Oresteia. The TLDR is that when Agamemnon returned home from the Trojan War, Clytemnestra, extremely pissed at him for what he'd done to their daughter, murdered him. And then their estranged son Orestes returned home to avenge his father and killed Clytemnestra. Then Orestes was hounded by the Furies because he'd committed matricide. There's a trial, Athena makes the deciding vote, and Orestes is freed from the wrath of the Furies. So what does this have to do with Iphigenia Moss? It's kind of hard to say. Both stories share themes of revenge. Iphigenia Moss had stopped eating as a form of revenge against her father. She also did not hesitate to spend all of her sponsorship money on food for her tribute, which was likely another form of revenge against him. In the mythology, we know exactly what her father did. We know that he killed her. But in the Hunger Games, we don't know, and a lot of people have speculated that her father was abusive towards her. I believe that. I also have a headcanon that she wanted to continue schooling at the university after she'd done her studies at the academy, and her father didn't want that. He wanted her to go get married, and she was like, fuck that, I want to go to school, I want to be an academic. I don't know if there's any merit in that, but yeah. Okay, next up we have Juno Phipps, who was the mentor for the District 8 tribute Bobbin, who was killed by Corio. She was originally disappointed with her assigned mentee, but came around when Bobbin told her how many ways he could kill someone with a sewing needle. After the news of Bobbin's death, Juno Phipps demanded that she get a chance to rewatch the footage to know exactly how he died, but of course the footage had been tampered with and altered by Dr. Gall to conceal Sejanus and Corio when they were in the arena. She was snooty and sulked when Bobbin died, though not because he died, but because she lost a chance at winning any prizes. Juno is the Roman name for the Greek goddess Hera, who was a bit of a sore loser herself. She was the queen of the gods, the goddess of marriage, and she was married to Zeus, who, like I've mentioned, was a serial cheater. Because she couldn't take revenge on her husband, she took revenge on the women that he cheated with. Great way to go about that, Hera. And these were women who 9 times out of 10 did not consent to being with Zeus. I already mentioned the story of Io, but there were countless others. Also, she was jealous that Zeus was able to birth Athena all on his own. He didn't actually do it on his own, though. Let's remember that he swallowed Athena's mother, Metis, and she's actually the one who gave birth to her. And so Hera decided that she was going to give birth to a child of her own, and she gave birth to Hephaestus. And you might be like, wait a minute, wasn't Hephaestus the one who smacked Zeus's head with an axe to release Athena? And you would be right. Here's the thing, there is no chronology within mythology. You just gotta roll with it. Anyways, Hephaestus is born, and Hera takes one look at the child and thinks him so ugly that she launches him from Mount Olympus, and he falls all the way down to Earth. And he is disabled because of this. There is another version of the myth where I think he is born disabled, and another version of the myth where it is Zeus who throws him from Olympus. Zeus and Hera definitely need couples therapy. Being one of the 12 Olympians, Hera is, in a way, a founder of Olympus, similar to how the Phipps family was a founding family of the capital. And both Junos were sore losers. Okay, next up we have one of my favorite characters in both the Hunger Games and the mythology. That is Lavinia. Lavinia was the Avox who served Katniss in the 74th and 75th Hunger Games, and she wasn't named until Mockingjay. Katniss believed she was originally a capital citizen who tried to escape, and she witnessed them running through the woods of District 12. Lavinia's male companion was killed, and Lavinia was captured and forcibly mutilated into an Avox. After the 75th Games, she was tortured and killed by electrocution in front of PETA. Her notable Physical characteristics were that she had red hair and never smiled. Lavinia from mythology is the daughter of King Latinus and the last wife of Aeneas. She is the object that Aeneas and Turnus go to war over in the Aeneid. This epic poem describes Aeneas' journey from Troy to Italy, where his mother Venus tells him that he is destined to found the Roman Empire. When he gets there, he's supposed to marry Lavinia, but she is betrothed to another named Turnus, hence the war. And she is not named until, I believe it is book 6, which is halfway through the epic poem, even though she is a critical factor in this story. When she is finally named, it is not in reference to who she is as a person, what her dreams and aspirations are, no. It is in reference to a son that she will bear for Aeneas. His name is Silvius, and his name is Albin, and he'll be the final son that you'll have. Your wife Lavinia will give birth to him out in the woods when you're at the very end of your old age. And he himself will be a king and the father of other kings, and through your descendants, our people will reign in Alba Longa, which is where the Roman Empire was. The Roman Lavinia also does not speak a single word in the entire epic poem, not even when her hair catches on fire. She doesn't even get a chance to say, "Oh my god, my hair's on fucking fire." Then, when chaste Lavinia lit the altar with a sacred torch, standing by her father, they saw her long hair catch on fire. Horrible! Her headdress crackled as flames scorched it. The tiara, bright with many gems, blazed up. She herself, engulfed in smoke and orange light, scattered sparks through all the house. This was felt to be miraculous and awful. Seers foresaw that she'd be famed in life and legend, but bring great conflict to her people. The parallels between Hunger Games Lavinia and mythological Lavinia are uncanny. Avox Lavinia's red hair is a callback to mythological Lavinia's hair catching on fire. Neither are named until we're a significant portion of the way through their respective stories. Neither of them speak. Neither of them are treated as humans. In the Hunger Games, Lavinia is an Avox slave. In the mythology, Lavinia is considered to be an object of marriage and a facilitator of birthing the Roman Empire. Nobody asks her who she is as a person, what she might want, who she might want to marry, and both women are blamed for a war. President Snow blamed anyone whose ideology did not align with his, and mythological Lavinia is blamed despite never having wielded a weapon. If I had a nickel for every time a woman was blamed for a war in mythology, I would have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right? That was my Dr. Doofenshmirtz impression. Anyways, moving on, we have Lysistrata Vickers. Lysistrata is the title of a comedic play by Aristophanes. It's set during the Peloponnesian War, a real war that lasted about 30 years between Athens and Sparta, and although this play is fictional, it's also historical. In this play, Lysistrata, she has a plan to put an end to this war. She gathers both Athenian and Spartan women, and together they seize the Athenian necropolis and make it known to their husbands that they will not have sex with them until they lay down their weapons and end the war. At first, the other women are hesitant to join. They feel as though they don't have any power, but Lysistrata is very persuasive. If all the women would come here from Sparta and Boeotia, join up with us, if we work together, we'd save Greece. And they do. The war ends, and the play concludes with Lysistrata setting the terms for peace, and then all of the Athenians and Spartans having a feast and dancing together. Oh, happy day. Lysistrata from the Hunger Games. Now, the connection is not glaringly obvious, but it is still there nonetheless. She mentored Jessup Diggs in the 10th Hunger Games. Her parents were physicians, and she had access to a lot of medications, which she used on Jessup's neck wound. She also gave him food, was kind to him, and helped him display his strength in his interview. In the arena bombing, Jessup threw his body over hers to protect her, and afterwards she made it known that Jessup was a hero. I feel like they really did bond and develop some sort of connection together. Lysistrata also tried to create a team angle between Jessup and Lucy Lucy Gray and was extremely frustrated at Corio when he didn't pick up on this angle and employ it with his strategy for Lucy Gray. But she was determined to have the victor come from District 12, and so as much as Jessup's deterioration from rabies upset her, she spent the remainder of her sponsorship money on water to save Lucy Gray from Jessup's attacks. What I'd like the people to know about Jessup is that he was a good person. He threw his body over mine to protect me when the bombs started going off in the arena. It wasn't even conscious. He did it reflexively. That's who he was at heart, a protector. I don't think he ever would have won the games because he'd have died trying to protect Lucy Gray. Oh, like a dog or something, Lepidus nodded. A really good one. No, not like a dog. Like a human being, said Lysistrata. She was very much against the games and did not like the idea of watching people suffer. Her acts of kindness towards Jessup are what inspire Corio to end up feeding Lucy Gray. She didn't like being in the spotlight, and it seems as though her primary goal was always to help place a spotlight on the people who otherwise would never have been given a second look. In this way, she's a little bit different to the mythological Lysistrata, who did have to spotlight herself to end the war and to be able to get the other women to join her cause. And although we don't know what happens to Lysistrata Vickers at the end of Ballad, we can definitely say that small acts of kindness go a long way and can make huge differences. She was part of the revolution that ended the Hunger Games, a revolution that took a lot of teamwork. Just as it took teamwork from the women in the play to end the Peloponnesian War. Both Lysistratas were selfless, giving up something that they didn't want to. In the play, that was sex, and in the Hunger Games, that was a friend, a fellow human being. Next up, we have Persephone Price and Proserpina Trinket, and I've lumped them together because they are both named after the Queen of the Underworld, Persephone. Her Roman name was Proserpina. Persephone was the fertility goddess of springtime and was also the dread goddess because she was Queen of the Underworld. She was often worshipped alongside her mother Demeter, and there's a whole story behind that which I will get to. Her name used to be Kore, translating to maiden, but after being abducted by Hades, who made her his wife, she became Persephone. Her mother despaired after her kidnapping and scoured the entire earth looking for her lost daughter. Demeter neglected all of her agricultural duties, and this led Earth to go into a drought and a famine. Eventually, Demeter convinced Zeus to allow Persephone to return home, but because she had eaten the forbidden fruit of the underworld, the pomegranate seed, she was not allowed to leave, at least not permanently. And so she ends up spending 6 months with her mother Demeter and 6 with Hades, and this myth explains why we have seasons. A myth that explains something is called an etiological myth. Persephone Price was a mentor in the 10th Hunger Games. She was one of the prettiest girls in Corio's year, but he was disgusted by her because as a small child, he witnessed her father Nero Price cannibalize a woman's leg. Was she aware that she ate human meat? Probably not, just as Persephone was probably not aware that eating the fruit of the underworld meant you couldn't leave. There's also the connection of famine. Demeter's grief caused famine, and Nero Price resorted to cannibalism because of the Dark Days famine in the capital. Proserpina Trinket was a member of Hamish's prep team during the 50th Hunger Games. She was overly stressed about her grades and didn't seem to care or realize that she was preparing children to be slaughtered. When Magno failed to do his duties as stylist, she freaked out and called her big sister Effie to come and rescue the day. So how does Proserpina fit into the mythology? She doesn't really. But I do have a headcanon that might connect all of this, and you'll have to just bear with me because I promise it will make some sense. It's a bit of a leap, but just hear me out. I think that Persephone Price and Proserpina Trinket might be related. So let's start with a backstory about the Trinket family. So we have great aunt and uncle Messalina and Silius Trinket, who brought much disgrace to the family name. The disgrace involved weapons and blood, and it was kind of a secret within the family. Several people have already theorized that this disgrace might have been cannibalism, which I agree with and I think makes perfect sense, because it is something that capital citizens are very ashamed about within themselves. Is it possible that they changed their last name from Price to Trinket? I mean, Persephone and Proserpina are named after goddess Persephone, whose original name was Kore, so she also changed her name. There's more though. Messalina and Silius are actual historical figures from the Roman Empire. Messalina was married to the Roman Emperor Claudius. She was ruthless and promiscuous and had an affair with a Roman senator named Gaius Silius. They were both executed, and apparently the Roman Senate ordered that Messalina's name be erased from public memory. Perhaps the Trinket family tried to erase the Price name because after Ballad, there is zero mention of that name, which is kind of strange because a lot of last names show up later in the series. There's more though. Messalina, the real Messalina, was cousins with Emperor Nero. Going back to the Hunger Games, who was Persephone Price's father? And Nero Price. And what did Nero Price do? A cannibalism. And now we have come full circle in the Trinket family disgrace. How exactly these two might be related, I don't know. But I do think that there is some sort of relation there because Collins does not name her characters randomly. Every name has a very specific meaning for a very specific reason. So why do they basically have the same first name? Why are they both named after the same goddess? Anyways, I know those connections are very loose. You don't have to agree with this headcanon. Please don't bully me for my theory. Okay, moving on. We have Remus Dolittle and Romulus Thread, who I am also clumping together. Because in the mythology, Remus and Romulus were twin brothers. They were the sons of Mars, the Roman god of war, and of Rhea Silvia, a descendant of Aeneas. Their granduncle Amulius usurped the throne from their grandfather Numitor, and when they were born, Amulius ordered that the boys be killed via exposure. In mythology, whenever a child is exposed to the elements, they never die, and so you better watch your back. So, of course, the two boys lived, and they were suckled and raised by a she-wolf. Eventually, Romulus was able to restore the kingdom's throne by killing Amulius, and the brothers decided that one of them should found a new city, Rome. However, they couldn't decide exactly who should be the founder, and so they held a contest of sorts. They would each pick a location, and from that location, whoever saw the most birds would win the contest. So Remus saw 6 birds on the Aventine Hill, which is right there, and Romulus saw 12 birds on the Palatine Hill, which is the one inside this little box here. So Romulus won, hence why the city is called Rome and not Rima, or whatever it would have been if Remus won. Romulus built trenches and a wall around his city, and he declared that anyone who tried to trespass would be killed on sight. Remus, not knowing of this new law, mocked his brother's walls and then leaped over them, only to be killed on the other side. Rome was originally an asylum for fugitives and exiles, but there was a small problem. They had very few women and children. Romulus's solution? Host a fake festival and invite the Sabine people, and then proceed to abduct and rape all the women. And this egregious act led to a war, and one of the Sabine women became Romulus's wife, and her name was Hersilia, and she was credited with ending the war between the Roman people and the Sabine people. Romulus died when he mysteriously vanished into a storm, and it's speculated that maybe he was deified by his father Mars, or he might have been killed by the Roman Senate, which he established. In the Hunger Games, Remus Dolittle, who I unfortunately don't have a picture of, so you gotta look at this fucker's face, was the downstairs neighbor of the Snows. And his family pulled all the strings they could to help him become a game maker in training, hoping that this career would provide him with a stable future. When the extra tax was eventually forced onto the residents of this apartment building, the Dolittles had to sell their apartment, and then they helped Tigris do the same. And I would assume that as a game maker, he crossed a boundary, he crossed a wall, so to speak, kind of like the wall that encircled Rome, and he was killed for it like Seneca Crane. We know that being a game maker is one of the most, if not the most dangerous jobs in the capital. Romulus Thread, he was the head peacekeeper in District 12 in Catching Fire, and he replaced Cray and was far more brutal in his rule over District 12. We don't know if he was born in the capital or District 2, but Either way, he was sadistic and cruel. He whipped Gale for poaching a wild turkey and also whipped Katniss when she intervened. He set up various devices for punishment and execution. He electrified the fences, he enforced a curfew, and he didn't allow Katniss and Peeta to say their final goodbyes when they were taken to the Quarter Quell. Also, he safely escaped District 12 right before the firebombing, although we don't know what happened to him afterwards. Was he killed in the war, or was he tried and executed when it ended? The rape of the Sabine women in the mythology makes Romulus just as sadistic as this guy, and the mystery of their deaths is another similarity. If the mythological Romulus was killed by the Roman Senate, then I'd assume that Romulus Thread was also killed by his own people, the people of Panem, but more specifically the rebels of District 2. I also mentioned that the mythological Romulus had a wife named Hersilia, and this was the name of one of the trainers in the 50th Hunger Games. He trained Haymitch and a few of his allies in knife throwing. Did she want this job? Was she being coerced? We can't say for certain, but I would assume that she did denounce the capital and perhaps sided with the rebellion when the second rebellion broke out. And finally, the last character that I want to look at is Titus. As I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, massive trigger warning for rape and violent assault. If you need to skip it, please feel free to do that. I will say this, however, the way that the survivor in the myth reclaims her voice is very powerful and might be something to identify with. I know that I do, but again, proceed with the utmost caution. And if you do want to read this myth, it is in Ovid's Metamorphoses, described in great detail. It is quite disturbing and horrific, but if you do want to read it, it's in book 6. So Titus from the Hunger Games, who I don't have a picture of, so we're using this picture of an avalanche, was a tribute from District 6. And we don't know what games he competed in, but we do know that it was shortly before the 74th Games. Katniss described him as, quote, a raging beast tribute who ate his opponent's hearts. He seemed to have suffered a severe mental breakdown, which caused him to eat the bodies of the fallen tributes. The game makers had to electrocute him to retrieve those bodies, and then because cannibalism did not fare well with capital audiences, because it reminded them of what they had to do during the Dark Days, the game makers killed Titus with an avalanche to ensure that he could not be the victor. The name Titus comes from a Shakespeare play called Titus Andronicus, and this play is largely based on the myth of Procne, Philomela, I don't know which one is which here actually, and Tereus. In the myth, Procne and Philomela are sisters. Procne is married to Tereus, and she has moved away from her home and begins to miss her sister deeply. So she asks Tereus if he can go back to their home and retrieve Philomela for a short visit. So he agrees, but when he sees Philomela, he decides that he must have her for his own. He rapes and then mutilates her and then imprisons her so that she cannot testify against him. He is a pig, to say the least. Tereus then returns home and informs his wife that her sister died on the journey. Again, if you decide to read this, it is brutal and detailed. I would, however, recommend the latest translation of Metamorphoses by Stephanie McCarter because she calls violent rape for what it is, unlike so many other male translators, and I feel as though she treats these stories with so much care, which is much appreciated. Although Philomela has lost her voice, she has not lost the ability to tell a story, so she weaves into a tapestry the assault and has an attendant bring it to Procne. Procne becomes rageful and wants to avenge her sister, rightfully so. She frees her and they are united once again. Unfortunately, it is at this moment that Procne's son Idis steps onto the scene. Procne is filled with so much rage in this moment because she realizes just how much Idis looks like his father. And she cannot bear to look at this child without being reminded of what her husband has done. And so she ends up killing the boy. And together the sisters cook his body into a stew and feed it to Tereus. When Procne reveals what they have done, Tereus chases her and Philomela out of the house with his sword, and all three of them are transformed into birds. In the play, it is a woman named Lavinia who is raped and mutilated, and her father is the one who suffers a mental break and avenges her by killing her rapists and cooking them into pies. I haven't read the Shakespeare play, but just based on the basic plot summary, it seems that Titus is meant to fill the role of Procne and Lavinia the role of Philomela. This Lavinia also has very strong parallels to the Hunger Games Lavinia. All three stories, Ovid's, Shakespeare's, and Collins, share themes of revenge, of violence, and of mental breakdown. And of course, of cannibalism. To be perfectly honest, I think Collins' choice to name this character Titus perhaps suggests that rape may have occurred within the arenas. I do think that it is quite plausible that Titus may have witnessed an ally, perhaps it was his district partner, be raped by other tributes and suffered a mental breakdown because of this. Perhaps the people he cannibalized were those he sought revenge against. We know that the games had no rules, and although the Capitol may not have televised such violence, that doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It is truly such a dark thought, and now I am regretting going in alphabetical order because that means that we are ending on such an unhappy note. But if there's any consolation, it's that Lavinia and Philomela found ways to express their pain. They both found ways to tell their stories, and there is so much fucking power in that. Her silent mouth cannot reveal what happened, but grief can make us very shrewd, and craft is born from pain. On a barbarian loom she hangs a warp, and into its white threads she weaves red markings that reveal the crime. And Titus, whether he intended to or not, made the Capitol audience wildly uncomfortable. Again, there is power in that. Perhaps it made them consider that 70 years, or however long it had been at that point, was long enough for this brutal punishment to continue. Perhaps it made someone, even if it was just one person, consider that the games should never have been created to begin with. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of my video. As difficult as that last section was to discuss, this was so much fun to create. I love being able to talk about my favorite things, the Hunger Games books and mythology together. It's so cool. I also think it's really neat to be able to see the exact inspiration behind certain characters because it really helps to fill in so much context and background information, and it helps me to create my wacky and weird theories, which I love to do, even if they are massive leaps and probably make no sense. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, stay fucking nerdy. Bye for now.